What a wild time to be a Celtics fan. Huh? You go from dreaming about banner number 18 to bracing for a possible tank season, all in a matter of weeks. But here's the thing. Maybe we need to start embracing the chaos. Bleacher Report just dropped their season projections for the Eastern Conference, and let's just say, it raised some eyebrows. They've got Boston finishing with 38 wins and 44 losses. That's 6 games under 500. And honestly, that number says a lot more about what the front office might be planning than it does about the talent on the floor. At first, I thought, yeah, maybe that makes sense. I mean, no Tatum for the bulk of the year, and the roster took a hit over the offseason. But now I'm starting to push back a little. Early in the offseason, I was one of the first people saying this was going to be a gap year. That this would be the season where the Celtics take a step back, focus on development, get their books right, maybe sneak into the lottery, and reload for next year. And back then, I got cooked for it. People were coming at me like I disrespected Larry Bird's legacy or something. What about Celtics pride? What about the culture? And now, here we are. The same people who told me I was too negative are suddenly talking about the team like we're headed for the bottom of the conference. So which one is it? Is this team still riding the wave of a successful core? Or is this the year they quietly take a dive for a top draft pick? Because if you're telling me that this roster, even without Tatum, is destined for sub-.500 basketball just on talent alone, I'm not buying it. Not in this Eastern Conference. Not with guys like Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, and a handful of role players who are all trying to prove they belong in the league. If this team ends up 38 and 44, it's because they wanted it that way. It's because the front office chose it. Not because they were doomed from day one. Let's be real. These players aren't going out there to lose on purpose. No one's trying to do their best Johnny Porter impression. These guys are playing for pride, for contracts, for legacy. But Brad Stevens and the front office, they've got different incentives. You look at the current construction of the team, and it's pretty clear they've left some gaps on purpose. The center position, it's a revolving door. You got Luka Garza, Nemi Izqueta, Orkada, I feel like I mess his name up every time, and Xavier Tillman. That's your front court rotation right now. Not exactly the kind of depth that screams we're going all in this year. But here's where things get interesting. Because while Garza and Quetta might be the names people are watching, I think Tillman might actually be the dark horse in all of this. And not just because he's a fan favorite from the fantasy basketball community. The guy showed flashes during the Celtics title run. We all remember that corner 3 in the finals. And there were reports last year that he was dealing with off-court issues. Now, we're hearing that he's in a better place mentally and physically. If that's true, maybe we've been sleeping on the X-Man. Maybe he's the one who ends up playing meaningful minutes. Still, the lack of moves in the big man department kind of signals what's going on behind the scenes. It's not just about talent. It's about intent. It's about management potentially saying, hey, let's not be too good this year. And that's not a crazy idea. Because with Tatum and Brown, you're pretty much locked into winning seasons for the next 8 years. You're not going to sniff a top 10 draft pick again unless something wild happens. So if you're ever going to grab a blue chip prospect, this is the moment. You're broke, you're injured, and expectations are low. Why not just bottom out and come back swinging next season? That being said, if the team does decide to compete, if they go the let it rip route, I genuinely think they can finish above 500. Because outside of a few top-tier squads, this conference isn't as terrifying as people make it out to be. Sure, I'll give you the New York Knicks and Cleveland Cavaliers. Those two teams are for real. But after that, the Orlando Magic made some smart moves, picking up Desmond Bane and Tyus Jones. That addresses their lack of shooting and playmaking. But they're still relying on Wendell Carter Jr., Jonathan Isaac, and M.O. Wagner in the front court. That's a slight upgrade over Boston's situation, but not by much. Then you've got the Atlanta Hawks. Solid core, but still depending on the health of guys like Kristaps Porzingis and the development of younger pieces like Jalen Johnson. It could go either way. The Pistons? Great young roster, lots of upside, but still a question mark. That's 5 teams right there I'd put ahead of Boston if they try to lose games. But beyond that, the East gets shaky fast. Milwaukee is a circus right now. Giannis is out here slapping teammates in timeouts like he's auditioning for the WWE. They've got Kevin Porter Jr. and Bobby Portis playing real roles. That team feels like it's teetering on the edge. Philadelphia? Yeah, Maxey is nice, and the Embiid-Paul George duo on paper is scary. But how many games are those guys actually going to play together? Embiid's health is a massive question mark, and George seems more interested in his podcast than basketball half the time. Brooklyn? They're fun but young. They drafted half the NCAA in the first round, and now they've got Michael Porter Jr. acting wild online. Toronto? Still paying a premium to be below average. Charlotte? Please. So again, if the Celtics are trying to win games, they're not finishing under 500. That projection only makes sense if this team is actively steering into the skid. And maybe they will. But it's not a given. Not with Jaylen Brown potentially stepping into an MVP-level usage role. Not with Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, and the rest of the young core looking to carve out bigger roles. If they decide to go for it, this could be one of those weird seasons where a team shocks everyone simply by trying. Now, speaking of Jaylen Brown, we got some encouraging updates. Word is, JB recently played in a game over in China. Now, we don't know how serious the game was, or whether he was cleared for full 5-on-5 NBA action. But it's a good sign. You might remember that Brown had a minor surgery right after the playoffs. There was some concern about how banged up he was, especially in that first-round series against Orlando. At times, the guy was moving like he had cinder blocks for shoes. But now he's back on the court. He's been seen working out with lethal shooter, and if all goes according to plan, he'll be fully ready for training camp. And this is big, because if there's one silver lining to a year without Tatum, it's that Jaylen finally gets to show what he can do as the guy. We've seen him dominate in stretches. We've seen the highlight plays. But now, with the offense running through him and expectations lowered across the league, the door is wide open for JB to put up monster numbers. I'm talking 28, 7, and 7 type of stuff. And if the Celtics are anywhere near 500 by the All-Star break, the narrative shifts. Suddenly, Jaylen's not just a nice secondary star. He's a legit top-tier guy who kept a depleted roster afloat. That's how reputations are made. That's how legacies are built. Meanwhile, over in Europe, things are getting spicy. Eurobasket is about to tip off officially. And while we're still in the friendly phase, some of the performances have been eye-opening. Kristaps Porzingis, for example, dropped 20 points, 6 boards, 2 assists, and a block in just 22 minutes against Slovenia. And yeah, that's a friendly. But still, he looked healthy, fluid, confident. And for Celtics fans, that's all we wanted to see. Last season ended with a whole lot of confusion. Doctors couldn't quite figure out what was wrong. KP couldn't get back on the floor, and it felt like we were heading into the summer with more questions than answers. Now, it looks great. Playing real minutes. Making an impact. I'm still holding out hope, probably irrationally, that Porzingis ends up back in Boston after this upcoming season in Atlanta. I just think there's unfinished business there. Maybe he gets his bag, the Celtics clean up their cap sheet, and we get a reunion that makes sense for both sides. I'd love it. But in the meantime, just seeing him on the court, moving well, getting buckets, it's a relief. And can we talk about Al Horford for a second? Still no real update. Nothing official. Just a few whispers that maybe he'd return. But honestly, I don't see it. Not for this version of the Celtics. Not unless something changes financially or emotionally. Does Al really want to go out playing 38 and 44 basketball? I doubt it. Now, let's shift gears and dive deeper into something that's been bubbling for weeks. The Peyton Pritchard versus Anthony Simons debate. This might honestly be one of the more underrated storylines heading into the season. Word is the Celtics are leaning towards starting Pritchard over Simons at the point. And at first glance, that seems like a hot take. Like, if you're just looking at scoring averages or highlight clips, Simons probably pops off the screen a little more. He's got the handles, the deep shooting range, the quickness, the type of guy who can put up 20-plus on any given night. But here's the thing. This isn't about flash. It's about fit. And right now, Pritchard just fits better. I know a lot of Celtics fans are scratching their heads like, wait, we traded for Simons just to bring him off the bench. But look closer. Pritchard's game might be quieter, but it's cleaner. It's more efficient. It's more team-oriented. And it's more suited to the kind of basketball Joe Mazzulla is trying to play. People forget that Pritchard has been with this organization through the highs and the lows. He's been there for deep playoff runs. He's been trusted in big moments. He knows the system. He knows the expectations. And even though he hasn't always had the minutes to show it, he's got real value. Let's break it down. Last season, Simons averaged around 21 points per game, which is impressive, no question. But he was doing it on a Portland team that basically handed him the keys to the offense because they had no one else. And when you're the default number 1 or number 2 option, your stats are going to balloon. You're going to take more shots, control more possessions, and put up gaudy numbers. But that doesn't always translate to winning basketball, especially on a team that has a more balanced structure like Boston. The Celtics don't need a 20-point-per-game guy who needs the ball in his hands for 40 possessions. They need someone who can move off the ball, hit shots in rhythm, defend his position, and keep the offense flowing. That's where Pritchard comes in. He's not as explosive as Simons, but he's more controlled. He makes smarter decisions. He defends better than people give him credit for. And let's talk about that for a second, because the Pritchard defense slander has gotten out of control. Look, he's not Marcus Smart. He's not locking up the other team's best player. But he's scrappy. He's positionally sound. And most importantly, he's consistent. He doesn't take possessions off. He's not getting cooked every other trip down the floor. And when you compare him to Simons, who, let's be honest, has been a liability on that end for most of his career, the gap is real. Then there's the rebounding. Again, not something you usually associate with guards, but it matters. Pritchard averages more boards per game, despite being smaller. That's hustle. That's effort. That's knowing where to be. And over the course of a season, that kind of stuff adds up. It keeps possessions alive. It limits second chance points. It's not sexy, but it wins games. Now, I get it. Simons has that microwave scorer energy. He's the type of player who can come in and drop 15 in a quarter when he's hot. And there's absolutely value in that. But maybe that value is best served off the bench, where he can dominate second units and play with a little more freedom. I don't think the Celtics brought him in expecting him to be the franchise savior. They brought him in to be a piece, a tool in the toolbox. And when you think about rotations and balance, it actually makes a ton of sense to stagger him and Jaylen Brown a bit, rather than throwing them both out there in the starting 5, where they might overlap in role and need. Also, let's not act like Pritchard is some scrub offensively. When he gets consistent minutes, he produces. He can shoot the lights out. He's got sneaky good finishing ability around the rim, and he knows when to push the pace. He's also shown flashes of being a solid pick-and-roll ball handler, which could be huge if the Celtics lean more into that style this year, especially with less traditional spacing now that they're not running 5 out all the time. If you've got Garza or Tillman setting hard screens, you want someone who can make quick decisions and hit that short roll pass or pull up for mid-range. That's more Pritchard's lane than Simons. And it's not just on-court fit. Chemistry matters. Continuity matters. Pritchard has been around long enough to have real relationships with these guys. He knows where JB wants the ball. He knows how to operate within Joe Mazzulla's system. That trust is earned, not handed out. Starting roles shouldn't be about hype. They should be about who's earned the right to lead that first unit. And for now, that's Pritchard. Of course, this could change. We're still a few months away from meaningful basketball. Injuries happen. Rotations evolve. Maybe Simons plays his way into that role. Maybe he forces the coaching staff's hand with his scoring bursts and floor spacing. That would be a good problem to have. But for right now, it feels like the Celtics are leaning into what they know. And what they know is that Peyton Pritchard can be trusted to do his job. But let's zoom out a little, because this Simons versus Pritchard thing ties into a bigger question. What kind of offense are the Celtics actually going to run this year? For the last few seasons, it's been threes and more threes. A 5-out style, slash-in kick, bombs away from deep. And when you got Tatum, Brown, Horford, Porzingis, it makes sense. That's a lot of spacing, a lot of shot creation, and a lot of switchability. But this year, the personnel looks different. No Horford, at least for now. Tatum's out for most, if not all, of the season. Porzingis is gone. So what does the offense look like? You might see a shift toward more traditional pick-and-roll sets. More high screens, more downhill action, more mid-range creation. And that favors players like Pritchard, who are comfortable operating in tight spaces, who don't need a ton of dribbles to get into their shots, and who can make quick reads. Simons can do some of that too, but it's not his bread and butter. He's more of a rhythm scorer. Give him a few possessions to feel it out, and he can explode. But if the Celtics are trying to get quick buckets, limit turnovers, and play inside out, that's Pritchard's lane. I also think people underestimate how much the Celtics might change their identity this season. When a team loses its best player and changes half the rotation, you're not just running the same stuff with different bodies. You're reinventing yourself, and that reinvention might be a little more blue-collar. More defense, more rebounding, more grinded-out wins. And that's why guys like Pritchard, Derek White, Xavier Tillman, they become even more important. They're not flashy, but they do the dirty work. They keep you competitive in games that could easily slip away. All of this ties back to the bigger narrative around the Celtics this year. Are they competing or are they tanking? Because if they're tanking, none of this matters. Play the young guys, rack up losses, grab a top 5 pick, and move on. But if they're competing, if they're really trying to win, then every rotation decision becomes massive. Every possession matters. And in that world, you start the guy who gives you the best chance to win from minute one. And right now, that's Peyton Pritchard. Look, I don't think the coaching staff is blind to the Simons upside. They know what he brings. They know what kind of firepower he has. But I think they also know how delicate the early part of this season is. Start slow, and the narrative around this team spirals. Start strong, and suddenly you've got momentum, belief, buy-in. And for a team that's walking a tightrope between rebuilding and contending, that early momentum is everything. It also says a lot that the Celtics didn't rush to crown Simons the starter, that they're actually considering all the angles, that they're open to competition. That's the culture you want. Nothing handed out, everything earned. And for a guy like Pritchard, who's waited patiently for this kind of opportunity, it's a chance to finally show what he can do as a full-time starter. Maybe it's temporary. Maybe it's just until Simons finds his rhythm. But maybe, just maybe, it sticks. So, where do we go from here? Well, all eyes are going to be on training camp. That's where the real battle happens. That's where Simons has to show he's more than a volume scorer, that he can defend, that he can play off the ball, that he can lead a unit without needing 30 touches. And if he does that, maybe the tide turns. Maybe he earns that spot. But until then, don't be surprised if it's Pritchard trotting out with the starters on opening night. I know it's not the sexy choice. I know it doesn't make for highlight reels or Twitter debates. But sometimes, the right move isn't the flashiest one. It's the one that helps you win. And in a season where everything is uncertain, maybe that's exactly what the Celtics need. But before we continue, please remember to subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest news about the Boston Celtics. Feel free to share your thoughts on the news in the comments as well. The whispers have been swirling for weeks, but now the storm is broken with undeniable force. SOTTO, the towering 2.21-meter Filipino sensation, has officially inked a deal with the Boston Celtics. The city, already pulsating with excitement from its storied basketball legacy, is now holding its collective breath, imagining what a player of SOTTO's stature could mean for a team perpetually seeking dominance in the paint. The rumors have been growing in intensity, from casual speculations in local gyms to heated debates on sports shows. And finally, the confirmation has arrived. Fans are already speculating about how he will mesh with the current Celtics roster, particularly in terms of rebounding, rim protection, and offensive versatility. Social media has exploded, with clips of SOTTO's previous games being dissected and analyzed in painstaking detail. Analysts are whispering about how a 2.21-meter presence in the post could disrupt opponent strategies, fundamentally altering how teams approach the Celtics, both offensively and defensively. There's an air of cautious optimism, a mixture of excitement and skepticism, as everyone waits to see if SOTTO can translate his overseas dominance to the intensity and speed of the NBA. Coaches, commentators, and fans alike are framing this as a potential generational addition, a pivot point for the Celtics strategy moving forward. The buzz isn't just local. International fans are watching closely, signaling the start of a global spectacle centered around a single, towering figure in Boston. Arriving in Boston, SOTTO immediately drew attention not just for his extraordinary height, but for the aura of potential that seemed to radiate from every movement he made. The Celtics' practice facility, a place usually bustling with familiar faces, was suddenly infused with an electric energy as teammates and staff caught their first real glimpse of the young phenom. Rumors of behind-the-scenes excitement swirled even before his official introduction, with whispers suggesting that SOTTO's arrival could force adjustments in rotations, defensive schemes, and even draft plans. Boston fans, long accustomed to the ebbs and flows of superstar acquisitions, began to speculate fervently about how the towering forward center would impact their championship aspirations. Conversations over coffee in local bars and across social media platforms were dominated by debates over whether SOTTO could dominate rebounds against the elite big men of the league, or if his game would require a period of adjustment. Scouts, agents, and former players, always attuned to subtle cues, were rumored to be making trips to Boston, curious to witness firsthand the integration of such a rare physical specimen. Even within the organization, sources whispered that management had prepared specialized training regimens to harness his length, timing, and skill set to maximize both defensive impact and offensive efficiency. Every sighting of SOTTO on the court, whether during informal drills or public practice sessions, was met with hushed awe and an almost palpable anticipation, feeding the narrative that Boston may have just acquired a transformative talent capable of reshaping the team's dynamics in ways long dreamed but rarely realized. As the news solidified, sports analysts and pundits could hardly contain themselves, speculating endlessly on the practical implications of a 2.21-meter player joining the Celtics roster. Rumors swirled that the coaching staff had already begun envisioning defensive alignments built around SOTTO's remarkable reach, imagining a team where pick-and-roll coverage, rim protection, and alley-oop executions would be transformed overnight. Fans engaged in feverish debates online, generating endless threads that theorized matchups with some of the league's most notorious centers, weighing SOTTO's potential strengths and weaknesses. A particularly persistent rumor suggested that Celtics veterans were simultaneously excited and anxious, seeing a player whose presence could alter touches, minutes, and offensive roles, forcing everyone to rethink their own contributions. Meanwhile, local newspapers hinted at clandestine meetings between SOTTO and team strategists, suggesting that Boston's front office viewed him not merely as a draft acquisition, but as a cornerstone around which a championship-caliber squad could be molded. Internationally, basketball communities buzzed with intrigue. Filipino fans expressed near-hysterical excitement, imagining SOTTO dominating on a stage historically dominated by players of different physiques and backgrounds. Every new practice report fueled speculation, from the way he moved in transition to how he communicated with point guards, adding layers of expectation that could either become a defining narrative or a source of pressure. As the rumor mill churned, Boston felt simultaneously poised on the edge of basketball history and immersed in the intoxicating chaos of potential, creating a city-wide suspense that felt almost cinematic in its scope. The presence of Kai SOTTO in Boston, while officially confirmed, continues to ignite speculation about the cultural and strategic implications his arrival may bring. Rumors abound that beyond his obvious impact on the court, SOTTO's towering stature might influence fan engagement, marketing strategies, and even international broadcasting deals, suggesting that the Celtics could be leveraging more than just athletic talent. Insider whispers indicate that the team may be planning special events centered around SOTTO's debut, aiming to capitalize on the excitement of having a 2.21-meter player who embodies both potential and spectacle. Local gyms reportedly experienced a surge in youth enrollment, with aspiring athletes hoping to emulate the Philippine-born giant's unique combination of size and skill. Meanwhile, social media channels overflow with edited highlight reels and speculative montages, fueling the narrative that Boston is on the verge of acquiring not only a player, but a marketable icon with global appeal. Analysts quietly debate whether SOTTO's game will evolve quickly enough to meet the intensity and speed of the NBA, weighing his overseas performance against the challenges he will face against elite-level competition night after night. Within the team, Whispers suggest the possibility of tactical experimentation, where SOTTO might play alongside multiple guards, stretch forwards, or in hybrid defensive schemes designed to exploit his length. Every glimpse of him during open practices seems to reinforce the rumor that the Celtics front office has a long-term vision in mind, one that blends athletic dominance with strategic ingenuity, leaving fans and critics alike eagerly awaiting the unfolding story. Even as Kai SOTTO steps onto Boston soil, the undercurrent of rumor and anticipation shows no signs of slowing, as if the city itself has become a living newsroom, dissecting every nuance of his presence. Rumors suggest that not only will SOTTO impact the Celtics' defensive identity, but his very existence in the locker room could influence team morale, leadership dynamics, and even how younger players approach their development. Analysts speculate about subtle but significant adjustments, such as positioning for rebounds, timing of shot contests, and defensive rotations, all centered around exploiting his extraordinary wingspan and timing. Meanwhile, international fan communities continue to generate a wave of excitement that crosses borders, creating a global conversation that reinforces the idea that SOTTO is more than just a rookie or a draft pick. He is a symbol of hope, potential, and perhaps even a new era in the Celtics' storied history. Reports suggest that the team's training staff has begun specialized sessions to develop his agility, endurance, and court awareness, indicating that SOTTO's integration is a meticulous, multi-layered process designed to maximize his immediate and long-term contributions. With every day that passes, the rumor mill spins faster, painting a picture of a Boston team ready to leverage an unprecedented combination of height, skill, and raw potential, leaving the city buzzing with expectations and speculation that seem almost too grand to contain. Kai SOTTO's arrival in Boston has undeniably become the epicenter of a whirlwind narrative, blending hope, expectation, and strategic curiosity into a single, potent storyline that dominates both local and international sports discourse. Rumors continue to suggest that the Celtics envision him as a transformative presence, someone capable of redefining both individual matchups and broader team strategies, particularly in controlling rebounds and altering opponents' offensive rhythms. Social media, sports forums, and casual conversations are filled with speculation about how his unique combination of height, skill, and mobility will manifest in live game scenarios, prompting debates that range from the plausible to the fantastical. Sources hint at secret practice sessions and internal evaluations designed to acclimate SOTTO to the pace and physicality of the NBA, suggesting that the organization is treating his integration with both urgency and patience. Fans, analysts, and journalists alike are captivated by the tantalizing question of whether SOTTO will become a generational talent or if the pressures of expectations could temper his immediate impact, a discussion that fuels endless speculation and rumor. The excitement is compounded by the international attention he draws, positioning Boston as a nexus for global basketball interest and possibly influencing marketing strategies, merchandise sales, and media engagement. Every sighting, every interview, and every reported drill adds to the mosaic of anticipation, reinforcing the perception that Kai SOTTO is not merely another addition to the roster, but a potential catalyst for a new chapter in Celtics history, a 2.21-meter beacon of hope whose presence alone is transforming the narrative before he even sets foot on the official game court. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Boston Celtics, please subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. We always appreciate your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.